Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing we're gonna do is a brief the state of the garden. So who is seeing what blooming and growing? I have borage plants that have flowers on them, and I have several shrubs that normally don't start to leaf out for another couple months that are leafing out now. How about you? What are we all seeing up?
I have radishes that are blooming and broccoli blooming in the garden.
All right.
From last year.
Yeah,
And,
geez.
we have a shrub out already there that has flowers, a bunch of things like flowers that use the local wild Chinese love. And I've seen everything growing from nettles to
Yes.
salmon berries are budding, and even the trees, new growth on everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Raspberry and lots of buds and blooming. Snowdrops, um, dandelions. I just saw the first few dandelions in February. Wow. And one other thing. Oh, my oh, what are those called? Those big bell-shaped flowers. I just posted a picture of them.
Latin rose, yes, they think.
Yeah. What is it called?
Well, I call them Latin roses, but they're hellebores.
Hellebores.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes,
They
and I
match
have the
their-
Latin rose ones.
Yeah, they
Big flowers.
yeah, they put through the snow.
And I just trimmed back my clematis, which has buds all over it. My peach and plum trees are like amazingly close to budding, to like coming up with their bud blossoms. And what else do I have? The one that's called Mother's Day plant. Do you know that one? It's a big, real big white bushy one. It's called Mother's Day plant because it blooms in May at Mother's Day, and I have flowers on it. It's mostly buds, but I have flowers on it right now, and I've probably got a few others around there. Lots of the California butterfly bush. What's that one called? Begins with a C. Ceanothus, yes. That one's got a lot of buds coming out on it already. I mean, it's crazy. We just did all of our fruit tree pruning over the past week, and I'm amazed at the amount of the plums and the pears and the peaches that are looking like they're ready to go. It looks like I'll have flowers in 2 weeks. Wow, that's crazy.
Scary.
And I'm at a little bit of elevation too, which really is weird. So,
Yeah.
I'd like to build a case for, not cleaning that in the fall and winter so effectively because.
Yes, Pixie
Things like
beats
the
us up on
brassicas,
that every month. You bet.
not pulling things out of the flower
Yes, my last year borages I didn't pull out, and I didn't realize that borages, after they die and melt, can actually send up new shoots on those melting stalks. It's
we
like,
call them an annual,
what?
but they're not.
Yeah, really. It's like now I'm just letting them be and to see what shows up in the spring. I also have Phacelia up this tall. It hasn't bloomed yet, but it's all over the yard from last year's seeds that fell. We were going to be able to talk about, spring coming kind of much later than we thought, but it's like, oh my gosh, it's February and the bees are out and things are happening. So we wanted to start talking about spring bees and what people tend to do in the spring with their bees, which is we have some information that is counter to what the normal spring system is when you start going into your hive. So we wanted to share some of that today. And I want to let Jacqueline start. Would you just like to get up here and start that, and I'll sit down and look at my notes.
Sure. So it's the time of seed catalogs. This is a good one, Northwest Plants Territorial. Time to get your seeds in. This is a good book too, Naturescaping. I'll pass these both around. What I like about this book is that if you want to attract bats, if you want to attract butterflies, if you want to attract squirrels, tropical birds, whatever, it's got a chapter on what to plant for it. So what was the topic you just gave me? Oh, the
Spring-
state of the
spring
garden?
beekeeping.
No, honey.
Which one?
Coherence and incoherence.
Oh, yes, the real topic.
The real topic,
Yes.
You probably can't follow my notes, but
This is one of the, coherence is one of the things that is so important in the wintertime. And right now, on all the bee lists that I'm on, I keep hearing, it was 45 degrees and it wasn't windy, so I thought I'd just go in and take a peek. Stop doing that. And not for the logical reason. I mean, part of it is to see if they needed help. Well, what are you going to do? There's not much help we can really offer in the wintertime anyway. If they've got enough food there and they're not being rained on, they're probably going to do okay or not. This is the part where nature culls out the weakness. It's okay to do that. But my understanding of bees is that in the summer, everything is, spring and summer is out, going out and expanding as much as you possibly can. And then there's kind of taking it up short in the fall and coming back into this meditative part that they live in the winter. And we have to respect that this time of quiet is, to someone who's not paying attention and just opening up bees and looking, it looks like, they're standing still and they're not doing much. There's not much going on. This is the time when they're dreaming their world. And I firmly believe that it's really an important part for us to be letting them be in that intimate time when it's like the dream time. Aborigines have the time when you dream time is when you dream the world. You're dreaming the past and the future. And I do believe bees are doing something like that. And if that sounds a little far out, just know that's the way I understand bees. And in my communications with them, that's the part I get, is that this is the time when they all come in and there's a quiet, but there's still a ton of activity going on inside. It's the time of unity, when you see the unity actually being the most unified. So really, as much as you can, taking them, being respectful of it. You can jump in. We do best when we just talk back and forth.
okay, I'll butt in. I just wanted to talk to my peeps that are across the country, let them know that we're still here. I was reading in this awesome little book, and one of the things that this was translated from whatever his language was recently by the Natural Beekeeping Trust, and so I picked it up. He's I don't even think he's alive anymore, but he was very much in line with Rudolf Steiner and biodynamic beekeeping, and he looks at bees from that standpoint, which is a completely different worldview of who bees are and how they are. And one of the things that he talks about is that bees, two really important things to remember about bees is that at their, what they truly are is exhibitors of the concept and the goodness of warmth. That warmth is very important to bees. They keep their hives certain temperatures all the time. The brood has to be kept certain temperatures all the time. Warmth is involved in the evaporation of water off of honey. Humidity, which is created with warmth, helps keep the hive healthy. The warmth warms up the propolis and makes it so that it can be worked. The bees are very much creatures of warmth and needing warmth. And we tend to forget that when we put them in flimsy little boxes, because we can say, oh, they won't freeze to death. Bees can handle cold. Yeah, we can handle cold. Bees can handle cold. But you don't want just your bees hanging on because, by gosh, they can handle it. We need to make a good environment so they can focus on what other things that they need to do other than try to constantly accommodate what we're forcing them into as a lifestyle. The other thing he says is really important to understand about bees is that he says bees have developed over the eons to have very delicate digestive systems. He said that's why they only live on nectar. essentially. Nectar is the food source. It's very easy for them to digest and work with. It has no impurities in it that the bees have to work against within their gut. So he talks about how important that it is not to give them sugar water, and how important it is especially not to give them sugar water if you're a sugar feeder. Do not feed them sugar in the springtime. This is when everybody's saying, hey, the bees are coming out. Now we're going to switch our sugar over from like 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 or something. And sugar is especially hard on their systems now because they're trying to do a cleanse out from winter. I used to live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I was aware there that as winter came on, all of the herbivores had a complete shifting of their internal digestive system. Because in the winter, there was nothing fresh to eat, and their bodies had to be able to accommodate a ton of roughage, bark, dried grasses, things like that. So we had this saying up there that in the summer they eat the grass, and in the summer they eat the breakfast cereal, and in the winter they eat the cereal box. And it's like, they have to find some nutrition out of that just to get them by. So springtime comes, and their digestion has to completely turn over to accepting wet grass. In the course of that, those digestive switches during seasons are enormous in the energy it takes on that animal system. So in the Rockies, you have the herbivore die-off right as winter comes, because the sicker or the weaker, when their digestive system started changing, they didn't have the strength for it, and they perish. In the spring, they've gotten through the whole winter, and they're still on their feet, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they made it. And then the spring grass starts coming on, and inside the entire system is changing, and you find winter kill all over the place. Now, coincidentally, up in the Rockies, that's when the grizzly bears come out of their dens. There's still snow on the ground. There's nothing for the bears to eat. So nature has arranged this die-off so that the bears will have something come spring. It's like this total give and take. Our bees go through a completely different digestive system process, because come winter, they're not eating honeys anymore. They're not eating nectars anymore. They're going into their stored condensed honey. They're not pooping for long periods of time. Their bodies have to shift to be able to retain feces for weeks and weeks on end. They're not going out and collecting water. They're taking drips that come off the sides of the hive, but they're not doing water flushes. So come spring, they have to recalibrate their whole digestive system. Sugar water is remarkably hard on them in the spring and can tip them over into nosema or dysentery really, really easily. So we have to be aware that in the spring, their whole system is changing over and their whole life is changing over. Also in the winter, the queens haven't been laying. There's not a lot to produce. None of the foragers are out there. The activities are completely different. In the springtime, they are not as closely related to each other in a kind of a mental way. The queen scent, she's not out laying regularly. Her scent is a little bit suppressed. And it's a time of what the beekeepers call less cohesion in the hive. When the hive is not quite working together strong and hard, and they're not singing the song of increase, they're just waking up. At that time of the year, which is springtime for us, and we want to get in our hives and start messing about, it's a really bad time to do that. And so we're cautioning everyone, think over your springtime manipulations that you normally do, if you have some that you do, and consider delaying them, or really consider how you do them. In what ways can you do whatever you need to do with your hives in the least invasive means possible. This is not the time to open up the lid and sift through your combs and see how everybody's doing. You just let them be until the weather really heats up and we've really got flowers coming on. Once the hive is in cohesion and they're working together and the queen's up and running, they can take more of your invasion. So that's the time to go in and see what you see. So as much as you can in early spring, observe what you need to observe from your observation windows and from the front entry of the hive. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I do.
Yeah.
At what point can we take the insulation off? Because my observation window is covered by that, so I can't see anything.
Ideally, we never want to take the insulation off. So what I'm going to have to do is cut around my insulation so I can peek in to look and then just put it back. And again, you know, one of the things that we're struggling with as a group is the insulation. And all of us went and insulated hives last winter and stuff. And now it's like, okay, now what do we do? It's all just been kind of slapped together with, you know, styrofoam panels or extra wood or llama fur in Barry's case. I mean, you know, whatever we can do. And now we have to take a look at it for summer and go, okay, the insulation's still here. How do we work around this insulation? Or do we want to re-insulate in another way? Because we've got a whole season to kind of do all that in. So yeah, that's a good question.
When I've insulated in the past, I really did only look at it in terms of winter. And I've just changed my point of view on it now. It's like that when I look at how healthy my hives are that are in trees or in, I've got 3 hives that are in not hive boxes, 2 in trees, 1 in a wall. And when I look at the vigor that those hives have, and it's really the same. They're retaining their heat in the winter, but they're retaining their coolness in the summer with that same insulation. So it actually is, the need is for different reasons, but it's still the same year round. So I'm really looking at that and learning from it, saying, you know, wow, when I put this on, I've got to stop putting it on in the winter and taking it off in the spring, putting it on in the fall and taking it off in the spring, and looking at from the bee's point of view, they're building and moving comb according to airflow and all these things. So when I change suddenly, take all the insulation out, I don't think I'm doing it any favors.
Yeah, wouldn't insulation in the summer be benefit to hive?
Depends on what you're insulating with, you know. And if it's got wood, I'm not finding any problems with it at all. But I'm curious, and I don't have a good solid answer for you. I'm curious about with styrofoam, if that does allow that breathing to happen or not.
I put spacers with the styrofoam, so my styrofoam's like this, and it's not got the rotation on it, so I put that towards the box, so that creates a little bit of. And then what I did is I took a piece of waffly plastic and made a frame. And the wafflies go this way, so in case there isn't any kind of moisture, it'll leave out. So there's a space like this between the insulation and the wood box. And to me, trying to figure out how insulation works in the house, and this seemed good for me because there was this little space, and plus the little waffly holes that will allow whatever.
And Gordon, the question also about moisture is in the summer, bees like incredibly dense humidity. Now, humidity is a lot of moisture in a hive, but it's vaporized, it's in the air. What bees don't like is condensation on the walls of the hive dripping down onto their heads and onto their combs. So condensation and humidity are really quite different. And evidently, my understanding of condensation is the more insulation that you have, that condensation has to do with, doesn't it have to do with the temperature against the wall of something, right? So if what you've got is a ton of insulation, that you will, then the bees are allowed to create the incredible high moisture content that they want all summer long. They don't want to dry out. So when we talk about ventilating the hives, people on all the bee forums are talking about, oh, I put a toothpick or something under the lid, or I open up this, or I open up a back opening, or I get the air moving through it. The bees do not want that. They don't want that. They want it a hot, humid box. It's really good for the brood to develop like that. And Varroa do not like a hot, wet box. So by keeping the humidity really high, it's also disturbing to the mite load. So that's the problem. It's not moisture, it's what form that moisture's in. Yeah, yeah. And basically bees do best when the outside temperature affects the inside temperature very, very little, or it affects it slowly. It's with our thin boxes, when you have like a 20-degree night and then suddenly it pops up to 60 the next day, the temperature in the hive goes boom, wah, and they're constantly trying to work against really fluctuating temperatures. So the more insulation you've got on it, the slower those temperature rises happen and the slower the temperature drops fall. And so the bees they spend much less energy just trying to maintain that precise temperature inside the hive for the brood come summer. So we really want to be working on insulating. And Kyle, we're going to be talking to him about his woodworker extraordinaire, and we're going to be talking about ways to make good insulation for different kinds of hives and stuff that we could actually sell to people, that we would have it available for them as people are starting to learn more and more about this problem of lack of insulation. Thomas Seeley's been talking about it a lot. So thanks to him, suddenly everybody's starting to talk about it a lot.
So insulation protects against 100 degrees.
Yes,
Yeah.
more, and from what I've read and from what Seeley has said, it's even more important to have it insulated heavily in the summer because they have to get this tremendous enviro respiration thing going in there to pull the water off of the nectar. So they really have to manage that temperature precisely.
And you can see in some of my hives, I've actually been able in the summertime when they're really romping with it, they're just going. You can put your hand in front of the entrance and actually feel a wind coming out of it. It's like that's when they've got their breathing internally going. That's what they want. It's they've got that heat pump thing going.
Yeah.
They're pulling out, they're sucking it out, and you'll see the girls will get out on the front porch and start revving up their engines and actually even increasing it to suck the heat out. But so much easier for them to keep it at a constant temperature.
Was that what bees about to come up and try to fan stuff out there?
No, actually, they usually, bee bodies are kind of warm, right? So when the hive is really doing serious honey evaporation, it's like, get out of here. We just get out of here. We need the space. So they just all stay outside. It's not like they're outside because they're so hot they can't stand it, which is what everybody thinks. Oh, they're out, they must be hot. I better spray them with water, or put ice cubes in the hive. They're not. They're out because they've been told to get out. So yeah.
That's why you see bearding. Yeah. They need to be somewhere.
And so as we come into spring, be always aware that anything we do to the hive that seems like a small manipulation to us can look really big to a bee. So if we're pulling out, if we're changing the size of the entrances, if we suddenly just pull off our winter entrances and suddenly we have a big entrance again, it's like, whoa, okay, well, that just totally changed the hive temperature. Now the bees have to work at that. Then it gets cold. We think, oh, we better put that entrance back on. Boom. Whoa, now we have to work for this. So anything that we do with futzing with the ventilation system in the hive takes the bees a tremendous amount of work. So let's all work this summer with creative ways and, bring them back and blog about them. What's the best way with the different hives that we have to start a real serious insulation process. This year, I went into winter with 4 hives. I was in the summer with around 9. Swarms were coming and going. So I had around 9 hives set up. 5 of them never made it to fall. And all of them didn't make it to fall because they did not requeen. That I was able to determine that with just about every single one of them. So they weren't able to requeen, which is a problem for bees nowadays, and people are starting to write about that. But I had 4 hives that went into winter, and they were skeps, except for one heavily insulated cathedral hive, which is a style of a topper hive. So my other hives were.
Can I butt in for just a second? I want to add on to what you said. The thing that Susan just mentioned about the fertility of the queens, this is something you also see in like human population. Fertility is like 40 years ago, you didn't have fertility clinics. 30 years ago, they were a wild idea. Now a fertility clinic is really common, and apparently 1 in 7 women has a fertility issue. And what you're seeing is this is just recreating itself in the bee kingdom as well. There are issues that are happening and we don't know what the causes of it are. We have strong suspicions what the causes of it are, but we're screwing around with our environment, and that's affecting the ability of the, I would even see it as the point where you have an overview and the master plan kind of says, we can't handle this much of what's going on right now, so we're going to shut down a number of these venues. So yeah, you had a significant portion of your queens not replicate themselves for who knows what reason, but I think there's something in the grand plan of nature that says we need to pull back a little bit right now, and whether that's part of the solution or whether that's just part of the crash, it's happening universally.
Yes. Yes.
Well, on that topic, I think we touched on drones and totally understood drones are in the bee world. They're just sort of like, oh, those dudes, they get kicked out. They're not. I don't think we understand the bee fertility in terms of the queens of the drones and what they bring to the DNA of the future of our bees. So anyway, that's a really good point.
And in just a few more weeks, you're going to see a whole lot of people posting about, oh, I opened up my hive and I looked and it's all drone brood. That means my queen didn't make it through the winter. Absolutely wrong. The cycle that's happening is, the first thing that happens is there is drone brood because there's going to be a series of queens laid over here, but we've got to have all the drones ready for breeding first. And so that's what gets laid first is all those drone eggs. So you'll see a bulk of them in there early in the spring season. When these drones come into maturation, then the queen can start to shift gears and say, okay, now we've got to build the hive up itself, including laying some queen eggs, because now all the other queens and all the other hives in our area have made their drones too. So my queens can get out and be fertilized. So anyway, most people don't recognize that. They think that the preponderance of the drones early in the season means something screwed up in there. And I've been seeing people in years past who are like, yeah, so I threw out all those drones. Oh, and you know exactly what's going to happen. That queen is going to go back in and go, now I have to start all over. So they won't go straight to laying the maidens, the scout bees. They're gonna go through their drone cycle first. So just know, if you hear somebody say that, please educate them that this is natural, this is the cycle, and that the queen will not start laying the bulk of the new year's brood until she's got happy drones all functioning.
Yes.
Has anybody seen drones yet?
Oh, my with the tree hive that I got, she's taken, I believe, some into the winter because I saw one a couple times in the house. Like, that just makes my heart swell when they take a drone through the winter. However many, but
2 of my hives had drones all winter. Yeah. When they come out for a poop run, I'd see the drones coming out. Like, whoa, baby.
I only saw maybe 3 of them all winter, but it's like, In the winter?
Yeah.
Okay. But that's just drones that they didn't kick out in the fall and they wintered over. So who knows?
So anyhow, what I did was I went in a winter with 4 of those hives, one heavily insulated, the others were skept. And this was the first year, this is my 6th year, and this is the first year that I had no winter losses. So it's like, ooh, this insulation thing, this is a good idea. And my cathedral hive last year, when it wasn't insulated, it was a big hive and the group shrunk down to something so tiny I couldn't even see them in the viewing window. I thought they were all gone. And then they slowly built up come springtime. And it's like, okay, no more of that. I'm sold on this insulation thing. Another time when hives are very unconsolidated and you should not mess around with them is when they've just swarmed. The queen is gone. They haven't crafted another yet. So that hive is vulnerable and the queen scent is leaving and they're in a waiting mode. And in times like that, if you go into the hive and maybe some maiden queens, some virgin queens have like hatched out and are moving around the hive, if the bees get upset during that time period when the new queens are hatching, they can turn on the queens and kill them. Because it's like suddenly they don't recognize the queen. Something's happening in the hive. They're alert to a problem, and they can decide that the queen's the problem. So I've been advised by some of my beekeeping friends in Europe, don't. When the queens are being raised, don't go in the hive. The other thing that we're aware of is that when the queens are in their cells, they're dangling essentially head down, and their little tails are attached by a thread of royal jelly. They're just hanging from this viscous thread. And when they want to eat, they just flip up and eat and then dangle down, flip up and eat and dangle down. If you get in the hive, when those cells are hanging and you jiggle any of those combs and those queens lose that thread, they can't get up and reestablish it.
They actually fall off and they're on the bottom. They're no longer hanging, suspended. And they can't re-adhere themselves. And they're inside of a closed, like a chrysalis, they're inside of it and they can't come back up and do it. So that queen is gone. And really in my early years, I never knew about that. It didn't occur to me that just bumping a box is enough to, end the life of a future queen.
So what time frame would that be? That would be before they swarmed or right around after they swarmed?
The time pretty much after you've seen the drones flying, probably at that point, queen cells are going to start being laid, and you can also hear them, right? So after the hive, after the hive swarms, the queens are in their cells. They're still becoming queens. And then when they're ready to hatch, and when they've just hatched, you'll hear them doing their queen piping and tooting from outside the hive. And then okay, stuff's happening with the queens, I'm going to stay out. And someone last year taught me, I was going to move one hive out of a top bar hive, and I wanted to move it into a skep. So if you're doing something where you want to move bees from one hive into another, I thought that I had it all worked out really well, and I posted about it. I waited 3 weeks after the swarm because I wanted all the brood, essentially all the worker brood, to hatch out. Because the hive is swarmed, there's no queen, nobody's laying eggs, all the brood is in there. 3 weeks, all those brood that she's laid will hatch out. So they're all hatched, so I don't have to worry about brood comb and babies. The queens are gone, However, when I posted about it, that hive that I moved never requeened. Okay, it never requeened. And I offered it a new queen, and they were not interested in that queen. They just stopped. And a friend of mine in Europe said, wait 4 to 5 weeks after a swarm before, if you want to start moving hives and moving frames, because the same thing. She's a You've got a virgin queen in there. Yeah, she's back. Maybe she's mated a few times, but she's not so well known to the hive. And if you go in at that time and really do a large manipulation like moving combs and moving bees and changing hives, they'll most likely ball the queen and kill her. So it was like, I think that's what happened. So he said, next time, just give it 4 to 5 weeks. He said, you were on the right track, but you have to know what's happening in the hive. And basically, we don't. I mean, I'm on a lot of the commercial forums, which are right now, it's get in there, splits. People are writing in Portland, when can I start doing hive splits? Is this too early for splits? Where essentially start swapping out brood comb, brood comb, brood comb, brood comb, brood comb, honey, 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 honey. And wherever the queen winds up, that's fine because the other hive can make a new one, and that's how you double your hives rather than let them swarm. But it doesn't make a strong hive because those bees didn't choose to decide they wanted to start a new hive, and their timing is not there. So frequently splits fail, and we don't realize why. But these times of cohesion and incoherency within a hive. It's something that you can easily know by just having some basic reading about, okay, what's the life cycle of the bees? What's happening right now in the hives? So right now, what's happening in our hives are there's drone being laid. There's probably maidens and workers now being laid. The hives, they're out and moving. They're starting to bring in pollen sources. So that work is starting, and they're going to be gearing up for swarming. Now, last year, we had our first swarm in like middle of
We
April.
actually had 1 or 2 in late March in
Yeah.
Portland, but then there was a wet period for a few weeks.
Yeah. Now, also for our bees, they call April's the starving month for bees because you can get your bees through the winter and you think everything's great and hooray, they're out, but there's not much out there and they're active and they starve. So,
And actually up here, it's we'll get 7 days of rain in a row.
right.
And even last year, I remember, because we had the swarms just starting up, we just had a few swarms, and all of a sudden there was
A wet period.
almost a month.
Yeah.
Where it was like a good solid 3 weeks where nothing, and my orchards were just in full bloom and no one was getting out there.
Yeah. My fruit trees, nobody got to them
So
because it was too
that's
darn
just
wet.
our area. That's one of the downfalls of it. This time of year, one of the things they're doing, first of all, they're doing propolis, obviously, because the saps are just starting to move. And we were pruning, and I just found a big ball of sap like that big. It's like, oh, I hope my bees have found this. The other thing is that they're out gathering pollen because they need protein. And right now, the biggest pollen producing things on our land are hazelnuts. Does anybody else get hazelnuts?
Yeah.
I am amazed how many, when I drive around anywhere where there's trees this month and look, the hazelnuts are the ones with all those long catkins hanging down, and they're just golden. They're just incredible.
Are those the
And
ones
if
that
you're,
come down now?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes.
And if you're going to plant something, man, oh man, plant a few hazelnut trees. I have hazelnut trees I have 2 on the other side of my driveway. One of them is 4 years old, one of them is 3 years old. The 3-year-old is 12 feet high and probably 10 feet wide. 3 years old, and the 4-year-old is 15 feet high and just a few feet wider than the other one. It's just amazing to me how full they are. And this time of year, this particular part of the country, they're really primary. So you want to have a lot of them around because the bees need the protein. You'll also hear this time of year about bees eating weird things. Like
They're in my chicken feed.
They're in the chicken feed, right. And like, what? They're in chicken feed. They're looking for the protein. And they'll find it wherever they can, even in weird places. So if you find them eating something that they don't normally seem to be normal to eat, just figure out if it's got a protein source to it. And that's probably what they're doing.
And this time of year, if we do get a big rain snap, because it would be highly logical if we would. The bees have already come out, they're already in build-up mode. This is a good, I mean, if you're a person who feeds bees at all, this is probably a good time of the year that you would do that. If the weather turns bad, try to have honey sources out for them that are undercover that the bees can get to. This
I
isn't,
just noticed though, I put out some just because I have some
yes,
combs.
me too,
I put it out
and
I
nobody's
noticed
on it,
Nobody.
which is good,
interested in it.
which
That-
is good.
It tells me, I'm hefting the boxes and going, yep, they're still pretty heavy. They've got it in there. Whatever I gave them isn't what they want right now. So I could be giving them, for all I know, I could be giving them a summer gathered honey, which is a different honey than a late fall gathered honey. And they actually, it's some stuff is supercharged for production and buildup, and that would be the spring and the early summer honeys. But the fall honeys are more about the time of cohesion and going back in. So they're probably not taking that because I probably gave them like a late spring honey. I don't know what's in there. I can't tell.
They're not going after mine either, but I'm going to watch that bowl the next time it rains. Because when the rains come, that's when they'll start taking that. Their preference.
You've got a big covered area.
Yes,
so they
I
can
have
actually,
covered
bees can come out
areas
and
so that they can eat even when it's raining. So I would suggest if you have hives at home under any kind of cover, platformy cover, just set a bowl down there that's they can come out of the hive and eat.
And I'm cautious
if
when
they
I do
need
that
to.
too about not attracting other bees to that particular hive. So I get conflicted about it because I still do it.
I'm not
But
much
I
during the spring because the robbing, I don't see that much happening.
No, I don't see a lot of robbing either, but I'm still aware of it. I don't want yellowjackets attracted to it. I don't want whoever gets attracted to it.
Oh, at
It's
this
just a
time of the
concern.
year, I want the yellowjackets
Because
because that's where I find them. I'll put out honey bowls under cover in the spring, and I'll look at them several times a day. And I found the queen yellowjackets there. It's like, oh, right, gone. I mean, it's great.
Well, if you're gonna go look, that's a good thing. You're not gonna go look though.
Yeah.
And since we're just on that topic, in the next few weeks, when you're gonna want to put out your yellowjacket queen traps, because yellowjacket queens, one queen, 5,000 yellowjackets that don't get born in the fall or in the summer.
So,
keep that in
at our
mind.
next meeting, we're going to be making those traps, and we're going to be putting together bait hives. So it will be a crafty meeting.
If anybody wants to get a good book on this is so simple. It's on Amazon, and I forgot what the price is, but this is the one that I use to build my bait hives. It's just simple, and in this swarm class, I'm going to talk about it and show some of the ones we built too. So swarm class will be probably the end of March. But anyway, this is if you want to get a head start on it. I'm going to pass that one around.
Questions? We've just got a short few moments left.
I was just going to say about it's interesting where the head goes when you talk about putting out honey and you're making this kind of form. So when I put out honey, it's a little tiny dish with honeycomb on it. Don't just put straight out honey in a bowl,
right?
Because
Yeah,
we all have had experience.
Cold weather will trap a little bee layer. Yeah. In warm I really, if I'm going to put anything out this time of year, I really only put comb out. I'm going to cover a few books.
Go for it.
Okay.
Oh, and wanted to let you know that on our website, we're in the process of crafting a books resource page. And if you read some of the books and if you like them, shoot me a little email review and I can post it under the book so we'll know who's reading them and what they thought of them. Oh, yeah.
So my first meeting here, and I've done 2 years of research to get to where I'm at with the pollinators. So I'm sensing through your webpage and through this last hour and a half that you're geared mostly just to the honeybee. So when you say things like kill the yellow jacket, I mean, pollinators to me are all kinds of beneficial insects and bees. The honeybee is just, native to Europe, not indigenous to the area. It's not a priority for me. So when you say stuff like that, are you taking into consideration the needs needs of the natives as well.
Okay, this one.
And beyond that, organic, not only that, but organic, native, indigenous, the entire pollinator community. Are all your statements geared towards an understanding of this holistic type of environment I'm trying to create?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our group, hold on, the group that we founded, because Xerces Society already exists and there's organizations that are wonderful that have to do with all the pollinators, we felt that the niche that wasn't being filled was trying to get beekeepers more cued in to actually working with honeybees. And our experience with that is as soon as people dive into more natural beekeeping, they become very alert to the pollinators on their property. And we are extremely supportive of the native populations. There's things that we'll be talking about when we do our garden swap and our seed swap, where we'll be saying, this is not a great plant for honeybees, but by God, do the longhorn bees love it. And this one is not great for honeybees, but by gosh, you know, the wool carders are all over it. So we're looking to plant things not just for the honeybees, but for all of the pollinators. Yes, yeah, yeah.
And my rule on Yellowjackets really only stay in a 500-foot area.
And I didn't mean to take on you for that.
Oh, no, please, it's okay with me.
Make sure that we encourage everything,
Yes.
including organic. I
Yep.
didn't pick up.
No, but I have a criteria that I follow on that, which is Yellowjackets stay within a 500-foot area. So I do not allow any Yellowjackets within my 500 feet of the hives area. 600 feet out, no problem. As a matter of fact, I've even taken little nests and moved stuff just like down the lane a ways. It's like, you can live all you want down there. I lost one hive, 2 Yellowjackets this fall, which is the first time in a long time that's happened to me. And I know what happened with it too. And I trust this implicitly. There's a balance that happens within your area. So I was aware that there were, well, actually, I had a bald-faced hornet hive, you know, one of those big ones like that. And it was out in my east pasture. And it was only about 20 feet from my neighbor's driveway, which is just on the other side of the line. And she has to carry an EpiPen. She's a wonderful woman, but she's allergic to bees. And she's totally cool about my bees, you know, have no problems. But bringing her garbage out every week, the bald-faced hornets were starting to hit them. And she called me up and said, you know, I want to coexist with you and your bees, but I can't coexist with the bald-faced hornets attacking. So, and they were starting to ping against her. So my friend Barry came over, and I really did not want to do it, but we moved the bald-faced hornets. We put them in a bin, and Barry took them home and let them go out in the woods behind his place. So we didn't kill them or anything. We left them inside of the sideways turned bin so that the hornet's nest could be in there without being damaged from rain and stuff like that. So they went on and carried on their life. Man, oh man, those bald-faced hornets were actually keeping the Yellowjackets at bay. The bald-faced hornets were only about 200 feet from my gazebo where I had 3 beehives. As soon as we moved that, all of a sudden the Yellowjackets came in from that side. And I could see them coming in from that direction. They would not cross. Yellowjackets are eaten by bald-faced hornets. So they were very aware of that bald-faced hornet hive. It was protecting my beehives, my honeybee hives. As soon as I moved it, wham, I got hit hard. And it just in a matter of 10 days, it was just, all of a sudden I lost it. So had I not, and my inclination always is, don't screw around with this kind of stuff. Had I not moved it, I don't think I would have had that attack coming in from the Yellowjackets. I think it would have stayed in that nice equilibrium that we had about who covers what territories these areas were set up. So, but that said, and having lost another hive to Yellowjackets, I do put out my Yellowjacket queen traps that are within my honeybee area. But I have 10 acres, and anything out from there is cool with me. I'm fine with it.
So I have tried to follow the Xerces Society recommendations for balance and equilibrium.
Yeah.
And I do realize, I appreciate what you said, I realize sometimes because we have such close proximity, we're not, the legal system are all the same needs, that we do have to meet those for a little bit.
Yeah, I only pretty much track the bees that are up on my hill that come, I mean, the Yellowjackets that come into the bee yard. And actually, because I now only am using my bamboo tube entrances, which Bill Catherall says are the bee's knees. He said, well, all my hives have a bamboo tube about that big around an inch, and it's about 3 inches. And so it's a bee gauntlet. So nothing gets in there. No robbers get in there. No Yellowjackets get in there. Nothing gets in there. So I've been able to stop totally worrying about Yellowjackets at all. Nobody.
And that was not the case a few years back.
No,
You were
nothing.
getting hit hard.
I was getting hit hard. My neighbor was not home very often, and she had like nests, Yellowjacket nests in her backyard, and they're coming over my yard. But that entrance solved all of my robbing problems completely and totally. And I have Yellowjackets in all parts of the yard, but if they're really badgering a hive, then.
And that's what I see in my tree hives too, that I see the hives that I have that have remembered how to close doorways do that. My wild hives are, I have one that's got an entrance this big, and it's just propolis, propolis, propolis. And then in the fall, you'll see propolis, propolis, propolis. And they'll come up and they actually fill it in. And then when they need to open it up and when their hive size increases, the door starts opening again. And they're completely in charge of it. I don't have anything to do with that. So they are their own protection. My tree hives, it doesn't matter. A hive can be getting hit right over there, and my tree hive is right here, and nobody is trying to touch them. It's really interesting.
Well, they say, Mikhail Cheeley says that traditionally Yellowjackets are not a common predator of the honeybee. That Yellowjackets, because they have the same, like that whole pheromone system where they really know what scents they're following. And if they target a hive, it's because a hive is not strong. Even if we think it looks just fine, there's some scent that's giving off that has made it so that the Yellowjackets will keep coming back. And like Jacqueline said, one hive right next to it,
2 hives right
not
here.
touched.
These guys got decimated. These guys, not one Yellowjacket was over here. I mean, come on, we're talking like 4 feet away. And it was just amazing to me to see that this was really targeted specifically. And these guys were rocking. They were doing fine. There was nothing happening to them.
So in your experience, the bald-faced hornets don't attack honeybees?
The bald-faced hornets do. Yeah, they'll eat some too. And
Bald-faced hornets are primarily fly eaters in my experience.
that's what they go after in my yard.
Yeah, when we were milking the cows, we would see a bald-faced hornet. And I remember the very first time I saw one, and my husband and I would milk on either side of the cow. We were like, whoa, that can't be a good thing. We said, well, let's follow our guidance, which is always observe first before I take action. So we were milking each side, and we just said, well, this one on either side, we'll keep an eye on where this bald-faced hornet is going. And she just landed on flies and ate them. And what was so interesting is my cow, in the meantime, is flapping her tail, to get the flies off. Never, ever, ever, in the whole time we were milking, did we see her tail head towards where the bald-faced hornet was. It was interesting. It was like she was actually very aware of where that fly-eating bee was and was giving it big leeway. And I'd seen that, since then I've seen that happen other times where my cows like the bald-faced hornets, which is I learned something out of that.
With different kinds of flying things, you know how they're so sensitive. You just do this to their, people whip them and stuff like that, but really you can get a whole lot more response from a horse or a cow from this. Very soft. Yeah. Well, what came into my head with looking at the different flying things with horses and their different reactions was that maybe they have some sense of the wave from their wings, because it's very different with each flying insect. It's a different vibration. And if this very light touch on their bodies, then they would. That's what came to my head when I was like,
It's a
why
really
is
different
the
landing
reaction
pattern. The
different?
flies are just coming in and landing, but the bald-faced hornet was, she would kind of something up. Something up. It was a different landing pattern. That's really observant of you. Cool.
I
I
also,
draw a towel in my hand.
In the summer, fall, the bald-faced hornets were really coming eating honeybees.
Mhm.
Just knocking them down. And I was trying to swat the bald-faced hornets. And
They were going into your hive?
they were, I think they were mostly getting bees on the outside of it, but they were going after the bees.
I've never seen them catch one of my honeybees. And I just see them around.
but they'll do it. They'll do it. You're absolutely right. So for me, those round entrances did it. Nobody gets in.
And also making the bald head or undercover in your porch is, to me, I would think that it would also keep away other balls if you didn't want the bald face.
It works for me.
Yeah, a fake nest, they actually
Yeah,
have
they're
them
very
online,
territorial.
where they roll them up.
I have one of those in the spring.
Yeah.
They're in my greenhouse. I put it up in there and I haven't seen those yellow jacket since.
So if they see that big hive up there, they know, okay, there's already other wasps
Somebody's
and residents here. We're not gonna hang out. I've got one that my granddaughter and I made years ago out of paper mache and a balloon, and I move it each spring to a different location. So, yeah, oh, okay, here's a new one, and really, the yellow jacket numbers have just been, they just hunt elsewhere.
So can you put those behind your bee time?
Yeah.
Will the bees not be freaked out by it?
No, they're not freaked out. I've got them hanging up in my bee yard. Yeah.
It's paper mache.
You can even use a,
I made my own.
A paper
It
bag.
was like 5 days to order one and they were getting in there real fast. They didn't went in, when I brought in the greenhouse, they just came right to it. Made me drop it actually, run out of it.
I've used that before where I put up like my replica of a bald-faced hornet hive up there, and it's very effective. Like we would hang one if we were barbecuing meat, you know, and everybody in town was coming to have a bite. It would work. I did find that when this fall, when my hive was getting hit by the Yellowjackets, and I tried to put one up, it had no effect whatsoever. But I think this hive had already been marked.
Yeah.
It had already, like we've already started harvesting your bees here. That's not going to deter us. When they're still on scouting missions, I think it's really effective.
It's just kind of the yellow jacket thing. So I almost always have yellow jacket nest in my yard somewhere, and I mean there's some are different every year. But I noticed I don't know, 20 years ago I planted a row of asparagus, and nobody in my area has asparagus. And that first year my asparagus came up, I had these things called asparagus beetles. They look a little bit like a ladybug, a little bit longer, and they just decimate your asparagus. And they lay these eggs on there, and these little grub wormy things come out and eat it. Well, after about 3 or 4 years of going around picking these things, squishing these little buggies on my asparagus plants every day, I noticed some yellow jackets flying around my asparagus, and I love yellow jackets. They go around and they grab those little grubs and they carry them away and they eat them. And I don't have a problem. I still see asparagus beetles, but they don't do anything to my asparagus anymore. It's like they eat asparagus beetle grubs, and I'm just like, and now this is my first year of beekeeping, so I'm going to have a big dilemma because because
It's a balance thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a balance.
and that's why I'm really interested in your I have seen.
I tell
Stuff
you,
about that.
I was at Portland Urban Beekeepers the other night, and Bill Catherall, the old president, came up to me, and he was looking at my skeps, all of which have that little bamboo tube. And he pulled out the tube and said, everybody, these work. And he said, he said, part of it is something about the round shape. The bees work better coming and going in a round than they do out of a slit. He said, I mean, watch them work. And he said, watch them work these circle entrances. It's a whole other world. And I find on the face of the hive, the bees fly on and they move like in a spiral. and they work their way in the tube, because people say, well, that little tube, I mean, then what do you do when the bees really build up and there's so many and they can't get in and out? So you have a traffic jam. Fine, you have a traffic jam. I mean, they can really take care of their inside humidity with my small little tube, and if it takes the bees a little longer to get in, no robber or yellowjacket's going to land on that mound of bees. And that tube is full of bees all the time. It's not like the yellowjacket has to get past 2 guard bees and then it's in the hive. That yellowjacket or that bald-faced hornet or that robber has to move through 8 to 10 bees moving like this before it gains entrance at the other end. And Bill said, man, that was genius. It was genius. Do it.
I found in nature, when I mentioned that I have that, 2 of my tree hives have this long cleft that's opened up like that. And I found in the traffic jam times, they'll just simply open up a secondary part of it.
Yes.
So, and I've even seen them open up like a crack over here that I didn't know was there, and they open that up in the midsummer. I've got late spring, midsummer, I've got a lot of bees going in there.
Mm-hmm.
But in the winter, back down to just one entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Could you bring a sample of that next meeting? What size it is?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Why don't you just bring it to you?
Yeah, I'll bring pieces of my bamboo and I'll pass them out. I should have enough. In fact, I'll ask Thea. Thea has Thea's got the like timber bamboo and stuff, so I'll have her bring some and I'll cut up tubes and I'll pass them out. And basically, if you've got a lang or something, you know, and there's no bees in it right now, just drill a little hole upper, and then when you have your bees in the lang, just seal off that bottom entrance and just let them use the tube. It's just great.
Good idea.
Yeah, me
Where do you
too.
think the ideal entrance is in location top to bottom for bees?
There's like way too much controversy about that. What Jacqueline and I have decided is the best entrance is somewhere not on the bottom, because you can end up with bee bodies in the winter packed and smothering all the bees in the hive. So just anywhere from not at the bottom to all the way to the top.
The really
Pretty
old
much.
lighting boxes that I've come across when I was living in North Carolina, the hole that they put in, I mean, they had still a landing and all that down here, but they always had a hole in the front and the back of a hive body box, you know, the bigger one. And the thing is the bees would close them up and open them up as they wanted to. And just what I thought was, why not just stop that, you know, jam up that bottom one?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be careful. You had a great experience about messing around with the entrance in the winter, where the bees had already propolized the whole entrance. You know, like be aware of what's going on there before you start cutting it off from the landing board for the lang.
I think that's interesting that some people propolised the entrance and others that the hive that I just lost this last winter didn't even propolize where the boxes met, like my previous hives did.
There were a lot of beekeepers with breeding bees who didn't deal with propolis very much, because propolis to a beekeeper is an inconvenience mostly, and so that was thought to be a good thing. But propolis that's their immune system. So when you have bees who can't modify their internal structure and they don't have enough to make their immune system functional, it's not a good thing. When I gather feral bees, and all my bees are from feral bees anyway, I'm amazed at how much dexterity they have with propolis. They do all kinds of things with it, and they make a ton of it.
Now, that's what I'd like to find out how to get is feral bees. I'm told by old farmers that there are lots of bees around.
Then you come to the swarm thing and do the bait boxes and you'll catch them. You put up the box and they come to you. Yeah. And in fact, in my cathedral hive, I've got the slit entrance because I hadn't invented my bamboo entrances when I got the hive, and bees have been in it since, so I don't want to do drilling. But I was looking through my slit entrance this, spring. And I can see that they have built propolis pillars down off of the combs on the bottom that go all the way down to the floor of the hive. And it's almost like when they come in the hive, they'll walk past and through these pillars. And then I just read this article, I think we posted it on our site, about on the Facebook page, about that bees who brushed past propolis and touched it daily. They studied hives. Okay, these guys, heavy propolizers, they're moving past a propolis scrim every day. These bees have no propolis. And then they compared like the health of the bees and found that the bees that were moving in and out of the propolis scrim had a much more active and robust immune system going than the bees that weren't. And they said, God, we didn't realize just brushing past it and touching it is enough to help activate their health system.
Technically, they don't actually have an immune system, so their relationship with the propolis is their immune system. So that they really do need to have contact with it.
Does anybody have cottonwood trees?
A what?
Big cottonwood trees.
Cottonwoods are
So
real
cottonwood
popular for
buds,
the.
Balmophilia and after the rainstorm in the spring, they are one of the major sources for the propolis, but they're also, as an herbalist, they're great for making tincture.
Balmophilia? Yes, is the tincture that, or the essence that's made from, is that right?
Yeah, people have different names for it, but
Say something
that
about it, 'cause I was
sweet,
just-
that amazing homey smell of the hives, that is the cottonwood bud.
What is
Resin. And so anyway, I know that there's some out where the rivers come together. I might take a trip up there this week or have after the spring. Yeah, some windstorm or something, so they get blown to the ground.
Could you say just a little bit about cottonwood and Balmophilia?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I take it, make both with oil, so I soak it in oil and then also tincture. And the oil, then I put into salves. And it actually helps either one, the oil or the tincture helps to preserve even like face creams and all that stuff. It's like a natural preservative, but it's also very healing for the skin. So like I say, I put both wound salve and then pain salve, so like helps with pain and also internally that way. So,
Yeah, it's a real primary one this time of year. We don't like more cotton easters.
So we should wrap it up. Remember, next month we go back to our. Oh, well, do them quick.
Okay. Okay. So what we're doing is working through my bookcase. So I'm just bringing like a half a dozen, 5 or 6 books every class. So this one is just what do you call these when they do these kind of photographs? They're like super high magnification. Yeah, something like that. I've forgotten what it's called, but anyway, they're just amazing pictures of bees. I don't like the fact it's funny. You can look at some of these pictures and I can tell that the bees are dead, which disturbs me. But nonetheless, that's how they're going to get a picture here. You can pass them along. Mason bees. This is just a good handy book to have. And yes, you all want to be encouraging more mason bees who come out early and come out there. We have in our area many different breeds of mason bees, and they each have like kind of a 2-week, 3-week window where that's their year. 49 weeks of the year, they're not busy. 3 weeks they are. So you'll see there are some of them that come out in late February and some of them that don't get busy till May. Queen of the Sun, you probably have all seen this movie. It's on Netflix. And this book that is from the movie is the people who are in it, including me, and we all did a chapter on some aspect of bees that really intrigues us. And that's a really interesting book. This is an old book. This is, I think it was first published, I don't know, 100 years ago maybe. It's old. At the hive entrance. And it's got what you see at the hive entrance each of the months of the year from May through November. this book was really helpful to me because I really knew years ago that I did not want to be inside the hives as much as I was being inside the hives, but I really wanted to know what was going on. So it helped me get a leg up on seeing when a bee does this, it means that. And I didn't have to go inside to see that. So that's kind of cool. And the other two books I have are plant books that are not specifically about bees, but you know, if you're, excuse me for coughing so much this morning, you want a well-rounded education about bees. So it includes gardening and introducing yourself to the language of plants and how to work with plants and herbs, and especially what Mary Helen and Victoria know, and Pixie, you know, really understanding plants at a deep level, and then the bees' relationship with them. Pam Montgomery wrote a book that's kind of like my book is for Spirit Bee. My book, Song of Increase, is for bees. Her book is for plants. It's really kind of an interesting one. I like her stuff a whole lot, and she is also an active presence on the internet and runs groups, and she really understands the depth of knowledge around plants. And then this is Mycelium Running. Has anybody read this book? Yeah. What did you think of it?
Oh, I read it a long time ago, but it just really.
It's Paul Stamets.
Yeah.
Paul Stamets, and
It just really kind of opened that.
Yeah.
All these things that open sort of the connection of everything.
Yeah, that's good. Paul Stamets, of course, we all know, is now working on bees' relationship with mushrooms, and you know what's going on in the fungal community that the bees are already aware of, that we're only just bringing to our own consciousness right now. But this book is well written and really fascinating with all the different aspects of how do you work with fungus. And one of the things that I noticed was a few years ago was we had some old logs. We heat with wood, so we had some old logs, and they were big ones, and they were ones that had knots in them and stuff through it that Joseph just hadn't gotten around to breaking up because they were the hard ones. And we left them so long that they had turkey tails growing on them and other things. And one day he just said, "I'm just going to take the chainsaw and just cut these puppies up." So he was doing the chainsaw, and of course he's spraying off all of the wood, the little fine piece, not even chips. It was just like dust, wood dust. And so he took those off, and then, man, I had thousands of bees on that little wood.
Sawdust pile.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sawdust pile. They were all over it. It was like it was made of honey. It was just a blanket of bees on there, and I kept looking at it going, there's nothing in here that bees eat. There's no flowers. This is old moldy wood that had fungus growing on it. Yeah, well, if you think of the bottom of a beehive inside of a tree, and you've got that little shelf down at the bottom that's got all kinds of fungus and little bugs and things that have a symbiotic relationship with bees, that's what's happening in there. So they were coming in and picking up something that they knew was useful to them and bringing it back to all my different hives. Every bee from different hives was on that for a few days. It was really cool to see, and it kind of opened my eyes up to, geez, I think my job is to plant forage for bees. I'm planting flowers, but not realizing what a relationship they also have with the fungal community. And in a natural hive, you would see that opening with all the bees at the top 2/3 of the opening, and a fungal community that's living inside in the moisture and the dampness and with all those other little bugs in there. It's also a part of the bee being. That colony it's integrated into its reality as well.
So that book goes totally in line with what our meeting was last month when we were talking about adding echo floors to all your hives. And this year I have a multi-pile that's 4 years old now, and that's where I'm going to be digging out all the material to put in my fresh echo floors, and it's full of mycelium. So I'm just really curious to see what's going to sprout in there in the humidity and the dark.
And if they don't want it, they'll take it out.
They'll take it out.
If they do want it, they'll encourage it. Yeah.
So we're there. We're done.
We're done.
So next month, we're gonna be doing bait boxes and, yellow jacket traps.
And you'll be doing that one. I will not be here for this
And
meeting.
she's not coming, so I have to do it all alone. But, it will,
I'll give you the date for the swim class.
okay, and we'll be at our regular time, regular day, which is the first Saturday of the month. I think we're set for that for the year, and I should have updates about the hide boxes and, getting the library and store for it. So, yeah, thank you all.
Same
Yeah.
time of day,
Hmm?
10 o'clock.
Yep, 10 to noon. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.